genes are physical reproductive mechanisms. They reproduce themselves down the generations. They replicate, they multiply, they're passed on from one individual to another. Memes are cultural objects, cultural ideas that are passed on and replicate and reproduce themselves. And what I see right across the Americas and right across the old world as well is a set of memes that involve the sky, that involve the ground, that involve geometry, that involve notions of life after death. And I think the only way to explain these is that they have been inherited from an earlier culture that was in some way connected with the ancestors of all of these cultures. I think that's what we're looking at in the Amazon. We're looking at a meme which was deliberately created. Once you mobilize a population to start creating huge geometrical structures, you are also facilitating many other possibilities that an organized population allows. I think that's what happened at Göbekli Tepe. I think that's why they created the megalithic site there, to mobilize the local population of hunter-gatherers, to give them a project to do, to engage them, and in the process of engaging them, to teach them the skills of agriculture, which are fundamental to any concept of civilization. And it's weird the way agriculture just suddenly appears in Göbekli Tepe. And there's huge agricultural mysteries in the Amazon as well. May I share a couple of those mysteries with you?
Before you do that, though, can you pull up that image from Göbekli Tepe of Pillar
43? Pillar 43 in Enclosure D.
I would like to see that guy holding that bag. That is really fascinating.
The bags are in a row along the top of the pillar. It's Pillar 43 in Enclosure D at Göbekli Tepe.
Is there an image of that online that's available? Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, there's the bags.
So there's the bags in a row along the top. It's the same sort of square-shaped bag with a curved handle that you find on the earliest image of the pillar of the feathered serpent, and that you find. No, you have to go above that, Jamie. Just a little bit higher up the pillar. Those bags, right at the top there. It's odd that this symbol crops up in many different cultures and tends to be associated with
What's
some
the
kind
mainstream interpretation of those bags?
There is no mainstream interpretation of those bags. That's my interpretation of those bags, which I freely confess. That's how I read them. I'm intrigued by the anomaly that the similar bag turns up in the hands of the Quetzalcoatl figure and turns up in Mesopotamia repeatedly in the hands of the individuals who are called the Apkallu, the magicians of the gods, the bringers of civilization.
And the plumed serpent, Quetzalcoatl it's an Aztec god, right? And
Quetzalcoatl is an Aztec god, but the Aztecs acquired him from earlier cultures. The very fact that an image of the plumed serpent is given such priority in Olmec culture tells us that system of ideas was present during Olmec times, which takes us back at least to 1500 BC, probably quite a bit earlier than that, whereas the Aztecs are 1500 AD, so there's 3,000 years between the Aztecs and the Olmecs, and that same system of ideas is running through all of those cultures.
And the Mayans had a name for it as well?
Kukulkan.
And what do you think that plumed serpent was?
I think it's very clear from the accounts that have survived that what he's associated with are two things in particular. One of them, he's a god of peace. He's not a war god. And the other thing that he's primarily about is giving the gifts of civilization. This is what you human beings need to know in order to move on to the next level. That is the function and the role of Quetzalcoatl, and there are very similar. We could refer to them as civilizing heroes who are found in other cultures and other locations. Osiris in Egypt plays that role as a bringer of civilization. There's hardly a culture in the ancient world that doesn't remember a time far back in remote prehistory when some kind of supernaturals or advanced human beings, and I prefer the latter, that some kind of advanced human beings were involved in a project to disseminate civilization. I mentioned the Tucano in the Amazon. The Tucano have a fascinating origin myth. They say that the origin myth states specifically that their ancestors were brought to the Amazon. They were brought to the Amazon by a group of supernaturals who included the daughter of the sun and an individual called the helmsman who steered the serpent canoe in which this settlement mission in the Amazon was performed. And what these so-called supernaturals did was they brought the ancestors of the Tucano to the Amazon, and they showed them the best places to settle, the best places where they might find hunting, the best places where they might create a village, the best places for agriculture, and then they left. But they left them behind one gift, and that gift was ayahuasca.
Wow.
That's the story of the origin myth of the Tucano. And it sounds to me rather like the other side of the story of that DNA signal in the Amazon, that a group of people were deliberately settled in the Amazon by human beings who they chose to regard as supernaturals. That's what makes sense of it to me.
I have another question. The Olmecs, you were talking about the genetics of these people that live in Native Americans, that they vary widely, but the Olmecs seem to have very similar features, the thick lips, the wide noses. Why do we think that is?
Well, this is part of a curious mystery that is not unconnected to the genetic mystery. It's been known by archaeologists for quite a long time that there are anomalous skulls in parts of Brazil, which appear to show very strongly Polynesian or African features, very much like the features that we see on the Olmec heads. And a number of archaeologists who got into trouble with their colleagues for this have used that to argue many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, that the settlement story of the Americas is much more complicated than we've realized. And what the DNA is doing is it's telling us that there was something really weird happened with settlement. You see, what happened with those African or Polynesian-looking skulls was that they were tested for DNA when DNA technology was not as advanced as it is today. And what that DNA showed was that they were more closely related to modern Native Americans than they are to any other people in the world. So the notion that there was some connection with Polynesia or Africa was dismissed. But now that we have very firm evidence of an Australasian genetic signal, Australian Aborigines, Papua New Guinea, Melanesians, with those kind of features. Now that we have the genetic evidence that is found in the Amazon, we have to go back to that old evidence and reconsider it.
Wow. I would love to find out what that is. They've always fascinated me. The Olmecs, it's always been such a strange image, the large heads with the helmets on them, and how... Do they universally look like that? I mean, all
of the features are very, very similar.
Wow.
They're very, very, very similar.
And always with the helmets.
And almost always. I won't claim that every single Olmec head has a helmet on it, because I think I've seen one that didn't. It's quite a while ago since I explored the Olmec area. But what's fascinating about them is they are supposedly the first high civilization of Central America, that they create structures on a massive scale, that you can see connections between them and the later Maya. That whole mystery of the Mayan calendar was clearly inherited from the Olmecs. It wasn't something the Maya made up. The Olmecs used that same symbolism. So the Mayan calendar is actually an Olmec calendar. And if we then consider the possibility that the Olmecs may just be the latest, the earliest surviving manifestation of that calendar, it could go back much further than that.